Remember when Pokemon made spin-offs worth a damn? I do. It was great! For those of you too young to remember, back in the good old days in Gen 3, 4, and 5, Pokemon released more than just mainline games and shitty mobile games. We got full-on spin-offs, and none of those spin-offs were more beloved than the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series. Alright. I'll stop talking like a cranky old man. But quite frankly, I can't blame people. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2, to many people, is the greatest Pokemon game ever released. And I honestly can't argue with that. PMD1 is also quite beloved as well, but not as much as 2. Now, it's been years since I fully played Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 1, and I simultaneously feel the urge to play it, as well as do a video. So screw it, why not? Let's see how well this proposed progenitor to the best Pokemon game holds up, shall we? So, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 1 was released in 2006, at least in North America, for both the GBA and Nintendo DS in the form of Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team respectively. The only real difference between versions being the sound quality, and a few Pokemon with the DS version superior due to the better sound of having the top screen, so I'll be sticking to that version for this review. I will also be playing this on the Wii U Virtual Console, by the way. The game was also remade with Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX for the Nintendo Switch in 2020. I was going to cover that version as well, but then I realized that would make this video take an eternity to make, and I already have another project in the works that has that issue, so I'll hold off on that for another day. It's also worth noting that I won't be talking about the post-game in this review for the same reason. All you need to know is that it's basically just a string of unrelated levels and events. Now, on to the story. One day, you find yourself having a weird dream where a voice gives you a personality test after which a Pokemon is picked based off your answers. Lo and behold, you mysteriously wake up as that Pokemon in the middle of a forest with another Pokemon who you select after being tested asking if you're okay. You quickly realize that the only thing you remember is your name and that you were once human, which confuses the hell out of the Pokemon. After quick introductions, if you get the reference with the names, you get a cookie. A Butterfree suddenly runs over, begging anyone who will listen to save her child Caterpie, who fell into a chasm after an earthquake. Without a second thought, you and your newfound friend journey through the woods to find the frightened bug and pull him out to safety, with Butterfree thanking you. After the incident, your friend realizes that you lack a place to stay, so they give you a house to stay in. The rent better not be super high. And asks you to form a rescue team with them, as there have been many natural disasters lately, causing many Pokemon to need help. After seeing how well you handled yourself, in not bringing out a can of saving Caterpie, with nowhere else to go and quite frankly nothing better to do, you accept and thus your adventure to save Pokemon in need and unravel the mystery of why you became a Pokemon begins. And that's as far as I'm going to go, because this is a game you shouldn't be spoiled on. Because the story is genuinely incredible by Pokemon standards. I know it's not a high bar, but I'm not done yet, and just really good in general. Listen, I love pixel art, and I really love good pixel art. We've established this. This game has really good and really expressive pixel art. I know some people might complain that both versions look the same, and to that I say, who cares? All the Pokemon have a full set of animations, including an idle animation, 2 types of attack animations, one physical, one special, with various hurt animations, sleeping animation, movement animations, basically everything. All of these animations are snappy, and overall, it just looks pretty in general, at least for my tastes. And this is a good example of a game not looking too bad when blown up far beyond its original resolution, which is always a massive plus in my book. The dungeons all look very simple, but there's a good variety of locales, and it will make sense once I explain the gameplay. Music is also really good. It's not my favorite soundtrack ever, but there are a good amount of standout songs that stick with me. It's just not as good as the second game, but still overall a good soundtrack. Now, the gameplay section is going to be very long, because there's a lot to unpack here. First off, I love the personality quiz. It makes choosing your Pokemon so much more interesting, and it's always fun to see which Pokemon you happen to land. Or I guess you can be that guy and brute force it, or look up a guide to get the Pokemon you want. You know who you are. You do get to select your partner though, which is a good thing as you can get quite a variety of teams based off it. The only real restrictions that I can tell are you cannot have the same Pokemon as you, and you also cannot have a Pokemon of the same type, which makes sense for balancing and variety's sake. Of course, you can always have your favorite of the bunch be your partner, or you can be like me and take a tactical approach. I actually like Bulbasaur, those two factors just happen to align. Now throughout the game you will be exploring Mystery Dungeons, which are areas with randomly generated floors that the player must traverse in order to find the stairs in order to move on to the next floor. These floors will be full of enemy Pokemon and various items you can pick up. These items range from healing items, items that do damage, to orbs which do just about anything. Of course, the enemy Pokemon will stand in your way to try to stop you from making it to the stairs, and can either be avoided, or at least attempted to be avoided, and confronted. Now what makes Mystery Dungeon combat different from regular Pokemon and other dungeon crawlers is that every other Pokemon cannot make a move until you do. So if you need time to plan out your next move, you can just sit there and nothing will happen. You can straight up go make a sandwich and they'll still be there frozen in place when you get back. The turn order is you, your party members, then the enemy Pokemon. On your turn, your Pokemon is able to move in 8 directions on a grid-based system. You have access to a toolbox containing the various items you are holding, have access to a neutral attack, and your moves of course. The Pokemon type matchup system is still at play here, but Pokemon hit by moves they would normally be immune to except for abilities will still take a small amount of damage. You can also use an item instead of moving or attacking. Of course, you can just skip your turn by holding A and B together. An interesting part of the system is that when moving or holding A and B, your Pokemon will slowly regenerate health. B can also be held while moving to speed things along the way. Good way to get down long corridors and quickly regen. Now, your party members are controlled by the AI, and by default will just follow you around and attack anything in range, and overall isn't the brightest. However, you can for the most part control them better by changing which moves they can use and their tactics, which while you don't have that many to start with, you can unlock more as the game goes on. I'd say the best way to think about the gameplay in this game is that it's more of a tactics game than a JRPG. Now I completely understand why some people find the partner AI to be pretty bad, as the game does a horrible job explaining how tactics work. But once again, once you figure out how it works, it's pretty easy to control. Although admittedly I love digging into stuff like this, so this might be a your mileage will vary situation. Speaking of stuff to really dig into, we have the IQ system. By eating gummies, a Pokemon can raise their IQ stat, and when it gets high enough, the Pokemon learns an IQ skill. These can be pretty handy, although a bunch of them are more convenience things than anything else, such as making sure not to use a move without PP and other stuff like that. And this leads to a big issue with the partner AI that drives even me up a wall, and that's item use. Yeah, instead of being able to just use an item on your party members, you have to give the item to them and hope they use it. Although I did figure out during the final 2 dungeons that you can force them to use it via the toolbox menu by hovering over the item they have equipped and selecting use. Which, by the way, the game never tells you you can do. Thanks, game. To summarize, the issue with the partner AI is that the game fails to properly explain how it works to the player, and no, that one screen pop-up isn't enough. I only figured this shit out as a kid by experimentation. Now, moving on from that, I did say the dungeons are randomly generated, and I didn't lie. You won't see the same layout in a dungeon that often, although they are rarely complex in nature. Mostly filled with rooms of various sizes and hallways. These floors can range from tiny to absolutely massive depending on the dungeon. There are also plenty of dead ends, and some dungeons have hazards like water or lava that Pokemon of specific types and abilities can walk/fly over. There are also some traps that can spawn, but I never ran into any during my playthrough, so I unfortunately don't have any footage. And that about sums up the dungeons themselves. In between adventures, your team is able to visit the Pokemon Square, where you can access various facilities ranging from shops and storage options, with the most interesting one being the Gulp Link shop, which allows you to use multiple moves in a row in one turn. Visiting these to prepare for various rescue missions is imperative. These rescue missions can be found at the post office and in your mailbox, and are randomly generated. These have the player enter a dungeon with an objective such as find a certain Pokemon to save them, or giving an item, or escorting a Pokemon, and are what you're going to spend most of your time in the story doing. Pro tip, if the plot isn't advancing, just do a bunch of missions and it will. Now, for most of the beginner dungeons, especially the first 2, you can kinda go in without a plan, but once you hit dungeon 4-ish, you need to really prep for the adventure, as this game is hard by Pokemon standards. with there being a ton of factors to consider such as food so you don't starve, or healing items for obvious reasons, or those attacking items for when you need to conserve PP. And don't forget a Petrify Orb for those damn monster houses. Not to mention the game is also extremely punishing when you fail, as you lose all the money you were carrying and at least half your items. Which isn't that hard to do because in the main story, if either the leader or partner faints, then it's game over. In fact, I'd argue preparations for the rescue are half the battle, with dungeons getting longer and longer. And boss fights are also quite the doozy, with them having an absurd amount of health and hitting pretty damn hard, as well as packing speed and modifying moves like Scary Face and Agility, which are actually a threat in this game due to the speed affecting how many turns you get per cycle. In fact, a big reason my team's move lists are the way they are is to deal with bosses and other Pokemon that outclass my team. And even with the perfect battle plan in mind, you still never know what's going to happen, as attacks that are pretty terrible in mainline, like Fury Attack, suddenly become absolutely terrifying. So here's the thing, if that gameplay explanation doesn't sound interesting to you, well, you're not going to find much here besides the story, because that almost entirely sums up the game. You prep for dungeon, go explore the dungeon, rinse and repeat. Not really much I can say to change your mind there. Now, one thing I do have to genuinely criticize is how you recruit Pokemon to your team. Basically, to recruit a Pokemon in a dungeon, you have to defeat a Pokemon in an adjacent space with your leader. And then there's a chance that that Pokemon will try to join you on the adventure, and if they survive till the end of the dungeon, they stay on the team. Sounds good, right? Now the problem is, in order to do any of this, you need to have access to that Pokemon's friend area, which honestly puts a damper on team building, as these are very expensive, and there are a shit ton of them. And considering how much money you want to save for dungeon prep in the main story, yeah, I didn't really do any team building this playthrough. Which sucks, because there were a few times where having a third or fourth member would have been nice, and walking around the friend areas are kinda fun. It's also worth noting that this game's main story dungeon heavily favors players with a fire type on their team, and hates grass types. I can't go into too much detail here because spoilers, but just know it's not the worst thing in the world at least, as proper team building preparation and item use makes this not that much of an issue. And even without that, while this game is hard by Pokemon standards, it's still a Pokemon game. So you can make it through. And that about sums up PMD1. It's overall a really good game with a good story and fun if repetitive gameplay, and will definitely keep you busy for a while. The main story is a little short, I beat it in under 10 hours personally, although to be fair I do know what I'm doing. And it doesn't do the best job explaining how everything works, but I still had a good time, and all of these issues I laid out were fixed in Explorers. Well, except for the doesn't explain how the partner AI works well at all stuff. Come to think of it, I don't think they ever truly solved that issue. They kinda just try and make Let's Go Together have more complex behavior, for better or worse. But that's a topic for another day. Thanks for watching and have a good, well, whatever time of day it is. I don't know, I'm not in your house.